I want to welcome to the program somebody I've been very anxious to talk to for quite some time. She's a magnificent person, very interesting, tough lady as she's proven through the years. Kellyanne Conway, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Josh. I love being on the Ruthless podcast.
Yeah, well, listen, you're a campaign manager, Trump 2016, a senior counselor of the president. Now you're selling a book.
I am. It's called Here's the Deal. It's behind
Yeah.
me. Thank you very much. I think people will really enjoy it. It's a big baby, 500 pages. And it is a memoir. It goes through my early years up until Donald Trump plucking me and asking me to be campaign manager in August of 2016. And of course, the rest literally is history. But I think there's a lot in there about the 2016 election, the 2020 elections, certainly different policy debates, some that I lost with the president, some where we succeeded together. But he, of course, was the president. He made the final decision. A little bit of palace intrigue, but mostly, really, I think things that people would want to know in moving forward. What happens to the 74 million Trump voters? Where do we go in terms of the man-made disaster that is the Biden-Harris administration and all of the great policy accomplishments that have been completely unraveled? It almost feels like spite is the governing philosophy for this current White House. And that's a shame because it's a beautiful country filled with amazing people. And we should have public servants who are doing their very best to help cure many of the ills that are vexing and perplexing Americans right now. But I appreciate you giving me a platform to talk a little bit about the book. I know you've read it. What interested you? What do you want to know?
Here's what I like the most. It feels like in this day and age, almost everybody who writes a book has to do a kind of kiss and tell, right? It's got to be, in order to have a successful book, you need to ruin every relationship that you've ever had, right? And you took a decidedly different tact on that. I thought one of the things that I found most endearing is you left some vulnerability out there. You talk a lot about being a working mom, your background, your home relationships, and how that all boils in, because it's so often public figures like yourself, nobody thinks about that, right? But it turns out, like, at the end of the day, you got to go home too.
There's no question. Home will always be the most important place, my refuge, my happy place, and family always comes first, as I make very clear in the book, but most importantly in my daily life, Josh. My four children are the four chambers of my heart. Nothing ever even comes close to being their mom, greatest gift imaginable. And the idea that in 2016 to 2020, I could be campaign manager, the first woman to successfully manage a US presidential campaign, and then Donald Trump's senior counselor in the White House, that is very telling of how far we've come. But it also somehow feels differently too, in that I still think that there were men who were trying to get in my way. I call them men behaving badly in the White House, and certainly happened in the campaign. Some of it may have been sexist, but I think a lot of it is just a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of exclusion, and a little bit of not being able to conceptualize the fact that here we are in Donald Trump's White House, where he is doing what he had done his entire career, elevating women to positions of power and authority. He did it in his organization for years, all of his businesses, The Apprentice, certainly, the campaign, and now in the White House. I also, it's not so funny, I guess, to younger generations, but I have to look at it with a certain amusement. I say that right here in New York City, when I was pregnant with twins about 18 years ago, we did this pitch to a major magazine, and I was feeling really good, and I got up to leave, and I noticed the man in charge of the decision staring at me, and it wasn't at my chest or my legs, it was my big pregnant with twins belly, that you couldn't ignore. And he wanted to know who would be servicing our contract. And I thought, well, I don't know, do you ask the guys, if they have mistresses or play golf, or how much time they spend at the bar or restaurant? So, you have to laugh through some things like that. And I think those real life experiences have made me never want to label myself a feminist. You just have to, I was raised by four strong Italian Catholic women, and I write about that in the book, Here's the Deal, Josh, and how that fortified me to deal with jealous little boys, how that fortified me to really live what the feminists pretend they're living, which is to look at everybody the same, to treat everybody according to the golden rule, and honestly, to just be a woman who charts her own course, who is very vulnerable in terms of her failures and her shortcomings, is very raw about some of the things people have said and done about me. But Through it all, I've held my head high, and I learned very early on from my mom and my two grandmoms, whose husbands had 8 children in wedlock and 8 children out of wedlock with girlfriends. I mean, it's very odd. I learned to hold your head high, don't air your dirty laundry, know that God has a plan for you. And I like to say, Josh, that what God has created, no man or woman can ever cancel. So, and I tell my own children, my 3 daughters, my son, certainly a lot of young people that I speak to these days, formally and informally, Josh, I tell them, nobody can make you feel badly without your permission. And so far, I haven't granted it to anyone, and I don't plan to. And people shouldn't also. There's so many ways that you click onto social media, feel badly about yourself, fear of missing out. These young girls read things and fear less than. You're not less than. You're much more than that. You're much more than your social media profile. You're much more than what strangers say about you. But boy, what a heady time where people think that my marriage, my children are any of their business. Have you seen these people, Josh? Goodness, thin-skinned, terrified, troubled people living in super thin glass houses.
I always thought
me.
that was the funniest thing about
Yes.
every single time you would, I mean, for years, first of all, you were everywhere. And one of the people who best articulated the Trump message from inside and in the campaign, because you just sort of got it innately, you sort of understood it. So, but as a consequence of that, you're always out there, right? You were always carrying the message. What I found so fascinating is that somewhere along the line, like you say, all these sort of self-proclaimed feminists, who proclaim all these liberal ideals, all of a sudden felt like your family was fair game, right? And you're like, you didn't have any thoughts beyond the talking point that you were there to try to provide. And I always found that so interesting, but I don't think anyone in your position has ever had to deal with it at the level that you did.
It certainly feels that way. I've been told quantitatively that's true. And let's just review quickly. I'm a staffer.
Yeah.
And my 15-year-old daughter's name was trending.
Yeah, it's
on
awful.
social media. Big tech allowed that to happen. Josh, at the same time, they were covering for Hunter Biden, the 51-year-old son of the former vice president, who then wanted to be president and now is the president. Somehow we have to shroud and protect Hunter Biden, who, along with benefiting from taxpayer dollars by flying around to China, Ukraine, and God knows where, and cashing in on that, he also had an affair with his deceased brother's wife. He was kicked out of the armed forces. He has a different baby mama, not to be confused with the deceased brother's wife. I mean, here's a genuine waste of space whose laptop was more verifiable than the Steele dossier. Yet, the Steele dossier in Russia collusion, delusion, chapter 30 of my book, that went on for 2.5, close to 3 years. But Hunter Biden's laptop, people knew right away. These intelligence officials with fancy titles signed on to a letter saying this is Russian disinformation. This is a shop-worn product of the Trump campaign. Folks, it was verifiable. And to have 51-year-old Hunter Biden shrouded, protected, and cosseted, and a teenage girl of a staffer for all the world to see is something I think, even through all my Christian mercy and forgiveness, I will not forget and I will not forgive. And it came from people who, look at this Taylor Lorenz character.
Oh,
She's crying on MSNBC. She's a 38-year-old Peter Pan of a woman.
Allegedly, she might be older than that. We're still
alleged. Well, she went to boarding school in Switzerland, but she's, got thin skin and blue blood from Greenwich, Connecticut. And just her beat is somehow to talk about influences, but she tries to ruin other kids' lives and then cries like a baby on TV where, saying, oh, they're doxing me. She's these narcissistic tendencies. Why does your audience care? They need to care for a very simple reason. Folks, the job of the media, very simply, is to get the story. It's not to get the president or get the staffer or get the staffer's family. It's to get the story. And the lack of curiosity about digging into anything that may be true or not true is really just what's startling. Look, Josh, I know it's easy to talk about media bias and media selectivity. That's easy to see, though. It's all the things people can't see. It's all the stories that don't get run. Where are the stories about the Sussman trial now? Where are the stories about Robbie Mook, the 2016 Hillary campaign manager, my companion as Trump's 2016 campaign manager, admitting under oath Hillary knew about the Sussman plan and said, yeah, take it to the media. They didn't trust Comey's FBI. So instead of taking it to the authorities, they went to where they knew they'd get a good story and a fair hearing, the media. They gave it to a New York Times reporter. Ladies and gentlemen, this affects you because think of all the stories that were never told in the 2,600 plus minutes of airtime that the Russia collusion, illusion, delusion received in lieu of you understanding what the economic policy or healthcare policy, education policy, foreign policy the Trump administration was.
Yeah, no, it's mind blowing. And I wish I could talk to you for an hour about that alone, right? Because it's just crazy beyond. And what happened during the Trump era in terms of the alienation of the media entirely is just, there will be books written about it. But let me start with this. When you walk in as campaign manager on 2016, unlike an awful lot of people in that orbit at that time, you had a lot of experience. Like, you knew what you were doing, right? How was that a nerve-wracking experience to walk into something that I had to have been questioning how much of it you could control, and yet your name's on the top of the ledger?
It's a great question and great point. You're absolutely right. And it was very heady. It was very exciting, but I took my shot. I actually gave Mr. Trump some advice that day when he offered me the campaign management position that I had been giving to many people over a long period of time. The Romney people, the McCain people running for president in between. I had talked about it openly in speeches on TV. So I don't know that anything I said was particularly genius or new. What was new and genius was Donald Trump's willingness to go somewhere where no one had ever gone and try out those things. I'll give you a couple quick examples at the beginning of my book. One example is I told Mr. Trump, look, you've already turned this fiction of electability on its head. You were told from the beginning, you can't win. That's a joke. You can't beat all these great Republicans who are running against you. You vanquished them all. You had center stage in the debate on August 6, 2015, and never lost center stage. Mm-hmm. So follow that through with Hillary, because all we're told is she can't lose. You can't win. Electability is a fiction. And you know what, Josh, you and I have been around a long time. You've been at the highest level of politics yourself. And you know that electability can suck the lifeblood out of some really great men and women who just need a little bit of a chance to prove themselves and win through a meritocracy. Electability pretends I know if you will or won't win long before the election. Electoral college is how you do or don't win. And I asked Mr. Trump, if you trust me enough to ignore electability and focus on electoral college, we can bust through her blue wall. But that means going to the upper Midwest, Rust Belt states with these messages that seem to be catching on. He said, okay. And I said a couple other things. I went through the whole litany of Hillary's deficits that made her different from her husband, Bill Clinton, who was a two-term president, and made her different from most female candidates who had been seen by voters for years as incorruptible, beyond reproach. Are you kidding? Not Hillary. As fresh and new blood, fresh face, strike two. And third, for those keeping score, third strike she's out was that women were seen in politics as natural negotiators, as great consensus builders, as genuinely interested in what people on the other side of the aisle think, and you could bring them all together. Strike three. Yeah. And so that I had been a student of Hillary, but I almost didn't take my shot, Josh. And it's a lesson to everyone, but particularly women out there, maybe not feeling completely confident in the workplace. He made me campaign manager, and I started self-sabotage. I said, okay, Mr. Trump, well, why don't you call me when you get back from Pennsylvania? We'll talk about it again. He said, okay. And the only person I told that day about my campaign management offer was my husband, George Conway, who was a big supporter of Donald Trump and a humongous, unqualified supporter of me. No holds barred. And he said, Kellyanne, you need to do this. And he insisted I take my shot as Donald Trump's campaign manager, promised to help more at home and with the kids, and did exactly that. And of course, was there on election night crying in his black MAGA hat at the Hilton, and took a job in President Trump's administration, all written about. And here's the deal. You're right. This is not a tell all and bore most, as so many of these books are. Yep. Because I'm not speaking up now, Josh, because I didn't speak up then. God knows I spoke up then.
Yeah, we heard you. We heard
yes,
you.
And you heard me. But I think it's all, yes, there are some setting the record straight. There are some stories before that nobody's heard. And really, there's a strategy in place that we executed in 2016 that could work again. Whether President Trump decides to run or he decides to not run, whoever runs will need to do what Trump did in this way. Take your message directly to the people. Show up where they are. The democratization of information by Donald Trump has transformed our politics forever. Maybe the COVID-compelled way we voted in 2020 disguised all of that, but that should come back again. Whether you like his Twitter feed or not, The fact, whether you liked him or not, the fact is that everybody received it instant, free of charge presidential communication.
Yeah.
If you didn't want to read it, don't read it. If you want to absorb, you want to dissect it, dissect it. But the plumber on the job, the stay-at-home mom, the billionaire CEO, all received it at the same time. And I think the America First agenda is one that many people are starving for right now because they see the abject failures of the Biden administration. This is America, Josh. People will always say, I think it can get better. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. It will get better. People now are not even saying that. They're saying it was better not that long ago. How do we get that back?
Do you think it's and I know you talked to the president about this, I'm sure you have, about whether he'll run or whether he won't run. I mean, I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm sure you probably have some inclination. But in terms of what you said about the America First agenda and about its deep resonance in communities across this country that basically hadn't voted Republican before,
That's right.
is that possible? Are there other candidates that you see out there other than President Trump who have the capacity of galvanizing that voting base?
Yes, if they want to be successful, they must, and they would. But President Trump, he is the heir apparent to his own America First agenda. There's no question about it. And those 74 million Americans who voted for him, highest vote total ever for a sitting president in US history, they also want lower taxes, inflation to go away, education to be more structured by the parents in concert with the schools. In other words, they believe fundamentally, as President Trump does, as we all do, that parents have a right to decide where their children go to school and what is taught there. They want to know that Putin and China and Kim Jong-un and Iran are in check. They want to know that these recalibrated reciprocal trade deals that benefit them as the workers, as the job holders, the job creators, the job seekers, they want to be assured that that can happen again. But, and this, I see it in the primaries. As I've noted, again, not a genius point, but an important one to raise. As I noted, all these people who are running in the primaries, look at Pennsylvania last week. They're all running as America First, Donald Trump, conservatives. Dr. Oz is the one with the president's endorsement, but Dave McCormick, Kathy Barnett, right down the line, they're running as Donald Trump, America First type of conservatives. That tells you something about his policy legacy. Mm-hmm. And yes, I have discussed the 2024 race with President Trump. I'll leave any announcement to him, but he sees two things that would compel him to do this. One is unfinished business that he wanted to tackle in his second term. And number two, relatedly, the unraveling of all of these policies like energy independence and border security and low gas prices and babies not hooked up to IVs trying to get basic nutrition as they are in Joe Biden's America because their mothers can't find infant formula. So everywhere he looks, he sees problems that he would like to help solve. But I think whether he runs or not, his footprint is so large within the movement and the party now that people can't, people are trying to say, I'm post-Trump. There's a lane for the non-Trump, never Trump people. That's more like a bike path, not a full lane. And it's already crowded with people who think that they're going to somehow get back to what? The John McCain and Mitt Romney campaigns with these loser consultants that are never Trumpers on TV. I call the Republican consultancy a walking RICO violation. The candidates often lose. The consultants always win. They make themselves multi-millionaires for losing. Where else does this happen exactly? So I feel like Trump transformed that in a way that we should not go backward.
Yeah, no, listen, here on that. Absolutely. Let me ask you about your entry into the White House. I guess I can't imagine when you're running the campaign, it's like first job first, right? You got to win the campaign. He wins. I'm sure you're elated, success beyond your wildest dreams. At some point you decide, and the president decides he would like you inside the White House. And you talked a little bit about in your book about how you had some of the fellas trying to sort of elbow you out a little bit. And I guess what I'm wondering is how much of you deciding to go into the White House felt like an obligation to try to implement the things that you were talking about and the president was talking about in the campaign because you'd been there before, you knew the city, you knew politics, you had a little bit more information than an awful lot of people around that table.
It was. You're onto something there. And very few people put it quite that way, Josh. So thank you for doing that on your Ruthless podcast. Look, I think less than an obligation, it was an opportunity, but what kind of opportunity? Not an opportunity for me to enrich myself. I walked away from a gold mine of 8 figures of life-changing money to go into the White House. it was an opportunity to keep those promises, to implement the policies. And I'm all too pleased that I worked for a president for whom the volume and velocity of the way he works allowed him to keep so many promises and deliver so many policy gains, even to people who don't like him and who are obsessed with him, honestly, completely deranged and blinded by their own feelings towards him. They have bigger houses now, fatter portfolios, many of them. They have a bigger perch from which to criticize him. But for me, I realized very quickly in my public service job at the age of 50, my 50th birthday was Inauguration Day, 2017, believe it or not. So I take this job on my 50th birthday. I realized almost immediately, A, how much work there is to be done, how much people are hurting, but B, how much impact and consequence a president's actions can have with a swoop of a pen, signing of a piece of legislation or an executive order, or even just him raising the visibility and the decibels to an issue that's important. That impact literally saves lives and improves lives. So public service is a wonderful calling. I have no regrets in terms of walking away from the gold mining money and going in. My only hesitation really was about my kids. Because as I said famously at the time, they're 4 crappy ages for me to go in the White House. And then when I got out of the White House, they were 4 crappy ages for me to stay in the White House. But they know they always came first, and that will never change. And I think for working moms to understand that, I looked up one day in a meeting at about 8:20 a.m., call it a random Tuesday or Wednesday. I looked around, I saw Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Ivanka Trump, Brooke Rollins, Mercedes Schlapp, and me. 19 children between us, 12 daughters, 7 sons, at that moment, ages 2 to 16. Now, don't talk to me about corporate family-friendly handbooks where they have paragraphs and lawyer-sanctioned, focus group verbiage about how family-friendly we are. Yes, we are. And then you try to exercise on those passages and you can't. I worked in a family-friendly, working mom-friendly environment in Donald Trump's White House, and I'm very proud of so many of the policies that he was able to put forth that dramatically improve people's lives. And he'll say, "Do you miss me yet?" Many people miss him, and many more even miss his policies.
Yeah. Well, listen, we're all glad that you did what you did. It didn't come without sacrifice, as you've outlined in this book, which I highly encourage people to buy and read, because it's an entertaining look, but it's also an important story, I think, for particularly a lot of young women, as you said. I got 3 questions that I got to give you before we get out of here. Okay. The first one, Kellyanne, if you could plan your last meal on earth, what would it be?
My last meal on earth would be all of my grandmother's homemade favorites, because she helped raise me. My grandmother Antoinette had a 9th grade education and was the most wise person I've ever known, really my favorite person in the world. So it would be her homemade gnocchi.
Oh, yeah.
Chicken parm. And I would say her steak piazzola.
This is a wonderful Italian meal. Yes. I love that. That
And
sounds
it would take me a long time to finish it all, so I would be extending my life that way.
You got to add a bottle of Chianti. You can't go in without something. I love it.
You go without something.
All right. So, second question: if you never got into public service at all, and let's expand this into your whole political career. If you could just blue sky this huge hole in your life where you actually never did any of the things that you ultimately did, and you could pick anything you wanted to do to fill it with, what would it be?
I'd have a podcast called Ruthless.
It doesn't pay that well.
There you go. It looks like lots of fun. Well, for me, I would love to be a chef, a professional chef. And the reason I would love to do that is because I'm only somewhat good at cooking, not really that great. And I feel like food and eating together is one of the last things that we have, what last touchstones we have. And people always seem happy when they're sitting across the table, exchanging conversation, sharing a meal, learning something new about someone else, whether it's your family every night, or it's a new date, or a new colleague, or a new person at the place of worship or place of work. There's something about bringing people together and getting them to try new experiences. And food is one of the only thing that still binds all of us. So I always wanted to be a great chef, probably because I know I lack those skills. That's what I would do. And I would open restaurants up all over the world and just employ lots of people. And I would just love it. I'd fly around tasting everything.
I love that. You'd be a great celebrity chef. And I think something tells me if you put your mind to it, you can figure that out pretty quickly.
Does it matter that I'm neither a celebrity nor a chef?
Well, you're kind of a celebrity.
You want me to be a celebrity chef?
You're kind of a celebrity.
I'll do the sequel. Here's the meal. Here's the meal.
I love it. All right. Third and final question. Our view is that successful people are basically motivated by one of two things: thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. And it's not that anybody doesn't like victory or somehow likes defeat. It's what drives and motivates them, right? And the thrill of victory people are kind of the sunny optimist, glass half full, always constantly reaching for the next achievement. The agony of defeat people are the people whose every success they've ever had in life, they enjoy for about 2.5 minutes, right? But every setback that they've ever had, they remember it and they vow never to repeat it. And it's sort of what moves them along the ladder to achieve more and more in their life. So those are the kind of two poles. I'm very interested to hear, where do you think you come down on this question?
Josh, love the question. For my entire life, until the last few years, my entire life has been the agony of defeat, learning more from my failures than my successes, my shortcomings, my deficits, things that didn't go, my unlucky breaks, for example. And I tell young people all the time, learn to accept and hear the word no more often than you say it. You will be rejected. You will be passed over. You will be denied an opportunity or an admissions into a school or a romantic relationship progressing that you felt you really wanted or that you deserved or you needed. And you have to dust yourself off and you have to hold your head high and not show. One of my favorite biblical verses is, if you're fasting, don't let your hair be dirty. Don't not wash your face. Like, don't let anybody know you're suffering. And so I think the same thing goes with the agony of defeat. So that's been my entire life, has been that way. And it also teaches you, by the way, the agony of defeat also teaches you to not feel sorry for yourself.
There you go.
To not try again, to not always just take the safe, smooth path, but to really do take the road less traveled. But I think recently, I love I don't know what you call it, but the thrill of victory. Yeah, the thrill of victory, only because the failure to win some of these battles means that the wrong-headed solutions or non-solutions and the wrong leaders actually get, in the business I do, get into office. And that scares me greatly when I listen to what they think their priorities are, when I see 107,000 overdose deaths last year after President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump got that number down for the first time in 30 years, just by focusing their efforts and their energy on that. When I see $5 gas prices, when I see parents at their wits' end, particularly moms like me, one of 3 million who were driven out of the workforce because screen time is going to be school time a little too long and people are upset about what's being taught there. When I see our military and our law enforcement castigated and denigrated and under-respected and under-resourced, it goes on, when you see the plight of Ukrainian people, because Putin is not in check because he invaded a sovereign nation. And it just goes on and on. When you see all of this, you worry and you say, I love the agony of defeat, but the defeat of freedom-loving people, of capitalism, of better ideas of free markets, frankly, and free people, that defeat is becoming everyone's agony, and it worries me greatly. But I got to tell you, I would tell a younger self, keep on losing, keep on failing, keep on, because it makes you be a striver. And it makes you, really look for that one big opportunity where, as the saying goes, one moment in time where it all comes together. But look, you also have to create your own opportunities. And I think people are just kind of waiting for that a little bit. But I'd say agony of defeat until I was 50, and now thrill of victory.
I love it. I love it.
By the way, if you saw me, it's the agony of the feet also. See, I'm in the wrong business. I would have been a comedian, chef, but yes.
Well, you spend an awful lot of time on your feet, and you've done a lot of good work for a lot of people across this country. Kellyanne Conway, the book is Here's the Deal. You can find it, I'm guessing, any bookstore or wherever you get your books online. Go out and read it. It's a good one.
Thank you so much, Josh. All the best to the Ruthless podcast. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Take care.
Take care.